A couple of little items before I get to the main thrust of tonight's podcast. And the first one has to do with the sitting governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, who is the chief executive of a state that has been pummeled by the results, or the effects, I should say, of climate change. Even today, the 24th, yesterday, the 23rd, the 22nd, it's just been an unmitigated disaster in Texas because of the rain and flooding. And when was it? Tuesday or Monday? When Texas had that so-called 1 in 1,000 year storm. How often have we heard that? It dumped up to 15 inches of rain in Dallas. And it triggered flash floods that submerged vehicles along a highway and left several people dead, is my understanding. But the day after that, Greg Abbott, that would be yesterday, Tuesday, he said that the state of Texas is prepared to handle what he called extreme weather. Extreme weather, you ignorant asshole, extreme weather. The words climate change will not pollute his Christian terrorist mouth. Extreme weather, right? He was at a press conference alongside the mayor of Dallas, Eric Johnson, other city officials. And Abbott was pressed by a reporter there about the impact climate change is having on Texas, which is obvious to everyone, apparently, except this asshole, including the record heat, the wildfires, the historic drought, the deluges that are labeled as 1 in 1,000 year rainstorm. I mean, Texas is having its ass kicked. It really is. It really is. And this reporter said to Abbott, quote, "At what point do you ever discuss or have a conversation about climate change?" Abbott didn't answer. He said, so we have constant conversations about what we categorize as extreme weather. We're dealing with more extreme weather patterns. What is it with Christian terrorists that they simply will not confront reality? Oh, come on, Mike, don't. However, Greg Abbott did note the period between April and from 1st of April to the end of July. It was the hottest on record in the history of Texas. But how did he address it? He made the point of saying that the Electric Reliability Council of Texas, referred to as ERCOT, E-R-C-O-T, that's the utility that operates the state's power grid. He said, well, ERCOT was able to handle it. He said, quote, "They were able to deal with a dozen record usage demands with ease." Oh, well, isn't that lovely, Greg? Oh, goddamn. And then he added this, quote, "We're constantly looking at what extreme weather may lead to, whether it be power demand, extreme heat, extreme cold, extreme heavy water, or even drought. We constantly focus on issues related to extreme weather, and we want to be prepared for whatever type of weather may be coming our way." He said extreme weather 1, 2, 3, 4 times in the space of 2 sentences, but would not mention climate change. The reporter then said, "Sir, can you even say climate change?" And of course, Abbott ignored him. Now, despite what Greg Abbott said, ERCOT, the utility that handles electric power grid in Texas, ERCOT has not always been ready to handle the extreme weather that is a direct result of climate change. And it doesn't make any difference what these Christian terrorists say. Reality is far removed from what they'd like it to be. For example, back in February 2021, when extremely cold temperatures arrived in Texas, the utility was unable to keep up with surging demand. It was reported by the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas. They reported that, quote, nearly 4 million Texas customers, representing more than 11 million people, lost power during the Arctic blast. as 38 of Texas' 176 gas processing plants shut down due to weather conditions. And if you remember that, it was a terrible, terrible time. Hundreds of Texans died from lack of access to heat and or water. But according to Greg Abbott, ERCOT can handle everything with these extreme weather situations. No problem, no problem. So do you want to believe the Federal Reserve Bank of Dallas or this lying Christian terrorist? Take your pick. And, of course, these intense cold spells, and this is what so many of these jerk-offs don't understand. The cold spells, even though it's counterintuitive, they're also an effect of climate change. Last year, there was a paper published in the journal Science, and the paper found that climate change is leading to more extreme winter weather as well as summer weather in the United States because Arctic warming distorts the jet stream. It's all interrelated. The entire planet. This is one organism. I don't know why that's not easily understood by the leaders of countries who surely at this point must know we either have to work together or we're going to die separately, I guess. But the Arctic warming distorts the jet stream. That's the band of air flowing west to east across the United States. And the polar vortex, which is a term I wasn't familiar with until, about 2 or 3 winters ago. But that's a wintertime area of cold air near the North Pole. And when the jet stream dips further south than is normal, then unusually cold air comes to places like Texas. Ta-da! And that's also why Florida, Georgia, North Carolina, South Carolina experienced an unusual snow and ice storm this past January. Do you remember that? We had snow here in Georgia, which is an infrequent occasion, seriously, even though we live at a relatively speaking high elevation for the state of Georgia. I guess Atlanta's about 1,000 feet above sea level. And we are in the foothills of the North Georgia mountains. The Daniel Scapin studio is anyway. So the weather that occurs, now I'm talking about weather, not climate. The weather that occurs in North Georgia is different from the weather that occurs, say, in South Georgia. Sometimes radically different. You know all this. Now, this year, Texas is also dealing with some extreme summer heat waves. Back in July, over a dozen municipalities in Texas set record high temperatures. Some of the readings were as high as 113 degrees Fahrenheit. And that event was caused by what is referred to as a heat dome. It's another consequence of jet stream disruption. And it's an inverse of what happens in the winter. In the case of a heat dome, the jet stream moves unusually far north. And then the heat from the subtropical areas south of Texas, in Mexico, Central America, around the equator, just moves forward with no problem. And in addition to all of this, much of Texas, in fact, like the rest of the West, especially the Southwest, is in the throes of an epic drought. Well, another one of those once-in-a-thousand-year events, I guess. The problem is, of course, as we talked about before in this podcast, the drought in the western United States is not going to ease. There's no reason for it to ease. In fact, it's going to get worse, according to the science, meteorology, climate disruption. The science is there. Last Friday, the Texas Tribune reported this, quote, Texans across the state are facing water restrictions as the state experiences its worst drought since 2011. Almost the entire state of Texas experiencing a severe level of drought, and only a few corners of the state, such as El Paso, are not abnormally dry during this year's particularly hot summer, end quote. Texas Tribune. And of course, climate change is causing these more frequent and severe droughts because, well, the heated air causes more evaporation and reduces the reserve water that's usually held in snowpack. This is what's happening outside of Texas, but in the rest of the West. And climate change is also partially responsible for this wave and wave after wave of overwhelming rain. Climate change disrupts the water cycle and pushes precipitation to extremes. It pushes it to more drought and more extreme rainstorms, like the 1 in 1,000 year thing that hit Texas on Monday. And Texas is the fourth state in recent weeks to experience a rainfall event that would normally occur, statistically anyway, once every 1,000 years. How do they keep track of that? Tree rings? I have no idea. But within the last month, southern Illinois received 8 to 12 inches of rain in 12 hours. A record-breaking rainfall there that caused, as it always does, flash flooding. Flash flooding occurred in the St. Louis area, which is very close to, southern Illinois. And then the horror that occurred in eastern Kentucky, where around 40 people died. Flooding occurred after as much as 14 inches of rain fell in some of the areas of Kentucky, the rural areas, the hollows and the valleys between the mountains in Kentucky, where people didn't have a goddamn chance to get out of the way. And then overarching all of this is the fact that studies by the scientists whose job it is to understand climate change, the ones that the Christian terrorists will tell you they're just putting out fake, that's not true. If God wanted, that kind of bullshit. But these academic studies have shown that extreme rainfall and flooding will become more frequent, more severe as climate change continues to get worse. And I guess the sitting governor of Texas, Greg Abbott, he may be of the mindset that as long as he doesn't say the name climate change, it'll all go away. Right, Greg? Right, Greg? Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.